consistently in your films explored that world with a lot of sensitivity, a lot of compassion. What keeps you coming back to this world and these characters?
Yeah, quite honestly, I didn't know I would have made 5 films in a row on this subject. I think it was Starlet, the film I made in 2012, that sort of opened my eyes to that world. We had done research in the adult film industry here in California, and I got to meet sex workers, become friends with sex workers, and hear their stories. And it really, I already had I feel that I already had a certain perception, one of empathy, but it was really hearing their stories that really made me say, okay, I feel like that I'm not hearing these types of stories coming from contemporary film and TV, especially from the US. And so, that was the way we went about Starlet, was to tell the story of a young woman and show the mundane parts of her life and tell a story that wasn't directly related to her line of work. I think for the purpose of, to humanize her and to make her an everyday person that one would see themselves in and identify with and root for, and I think that's just one. It's just one has led to the next. Now I think that it opened my eyes to the fact that sex work is just an umbrella term, and so there's so many aspects of sex work. So there's a million stories to be told in that world, and I think I just kept on discovering new stories to be told. And in this one, we wanted to explore the world of escorting and erotic dancing. And so we brought on a whole new set of consultants with this film. And Andrea Warehun, who wrote a beautiful memoir by the name of sorry guys, it's been a long couple of days, entitled Modern Whore. And I highly recommend it. It was her memoir looking at her 20s, escorting and dancing, and so that directly applied to the Annie character. And it was incredibly helpful to have her on board to read my script, tell me what was accurate, what wasn't accurate, the details that I needed to add in there that you could only know from being inside that world, slang, music. And so I think this has just happened organically with each film, meeting new sex workers, hearing new stories, and being inspired to tell those stories.
In terms of conceiving the idea of the character of Annie, is she a composite of different people that you researched or spoke to, or I guess I'm always so interested that when someone does research, when a writer or director does research, how much of it is a combination of a bunch of people that you talk to, and then obviously you bring your own spin to it, but I guess I'm asking, was there an Annie? Did you meet somebody who was an Annie?
There were a couple of Annies, but to tell you the truth, they were more to do with the world of Russian gangsters. That world that we heard some stories about some young women who found themselves in peril with the mafia because their significant other owed money to the mob. And that was, so it's pretty convoluted and kind of boring, guys, I'm sorry, but it takes place. This really comes from almost 15 years of wanting to tell a story within the Russian-American community of Brighton Beach and Coney Island. And then it was years later that this goes back to 07, 08, when Karin Karagulian, who plays Toros in the film, we wanted to make another New York story after Prince of Broadway, my 3rd film. And it just took us that long to 17 years to figure out what the story would be. But over the course of those years, I would hear many stories, and yeah, so it all came together. So in many ways, there are many Annies that make Annie.
Which brings me to Mikey and your tremendous performance in this film. I wanted to echo you and Sean meet. He gives you this sort of this sketch, this idea of what he's thinking about for this film and your character. How soon after that did you begin your own research process? Was it waiting for the finished script? Did you already start to do research before the finished script came your way? When did that start?
First of all, hi, hello everybody. I mean, we had about a year since meeting Sean for the first time to when we were actually on set in Brighton Beach shooting. And so we were communicating while he was writing the script and I was being updated, getting to know a little bit more about who my character was. So once I started to know those little things, I would do a little bit of research here and there. But I think a majority of it came after I read the script for the first time. And that was when I realized how much research and how much I was going to need to dedicate to learning about this character, about Annie, because she's someone who felt so far away from who I am, so different from me. And so after that, I really buckled down and started educating myself and started the physical research as well. Even whilst I was working on another project, I was still constantly thinking about Annie, and I was living in Baltimore, and so I found this amazing stripper-owned pole studio where I was able to take a couple intro classes and get a feel for what that was going to be, and I immediately realized how difficult it was. And that was, I think it was great that I did that because I was like, okay, right when I get home, I'm gonna need to set up a pole and practice like 5-6 hours a day or something like that because there was
Dad installed her pole.
Yeah. No, he did. I don't tell my dad anything about the projects I do because he gets very excited and likes to talk about it. So it was like, Dad, can you please go pick something up for me and install it in my house? I really need your help. And he's kind of like my personal handyman. So he was like, yeah, of course, sweetheart. And he sets it up and he calls me and he was like, oh, so does this have to do with your next project? And I was like, yeah, don't worry about it, it's okay. But yeah, there was so much I needed to do, and after that I started my more intense research up until the beginning of filming.
There was an interview that you gave where you talked about, in terms of that research, about dancing and that you have to be good as a dancer. You have to know how to read people, I think was the quote. I thought it was just such an interesting insight. What about that, in terms of just knowing what people are into, in terms of how they're responding to the dancers, or in terms of being able to kind of, I guess I wanted to kind of unwrap that a little bit in terms of what you learned in terms of how dancers are good at what they do. Beyond just the physical, there's also like something psychological going on at the same time.
Yeah, through my research, I quickly discovered that. Like even the first time going to a strip club, I was like, wow, this job is so psychological and physical. And so talking to our incredible consultants that we brought on the film, I was able to sort of unwrap that a little bit more and what that looks like. But you have to be such an intuitive person to look around a room, see someone who you think you could get along with or have some kind of chemistry, walk up to them and try to initiate that intimacy. And it happens very quickly, and it can be very like sensitive at times. I think you have to look at someone and think, what is it that they want? What's their fantasy? You share a couple words with them, like, oh, do they want sort of like a jokey kind of time together, or do they want something more serious? And I think with that comes, you have to have an emotional intelligence. And so I realized that and tried to implicate that into Annie as a character because it's so important. And I think that through realizing that, I was able to jump into filming those scenes, which are all improvised, of Annie meeting men in the club and picking them up, talking to them. I think my background as an actor also helped because I was able to see someone and read them. Yeah.
Yeah, Drew shot, we shot 3 mags for that opening scene before Annie meets Yvonne, we wanted to set up the mechanics of the club and show a night in the life of Annie. And so what do we shoot? Three 10-minute mags, 2 telephoto, right, and then 1 like handheld where you, and Mikey was essentially on a wireless mic. We had the club up and running with all of our background and our dancers all interacting and speaking full volume because I really wanted the club to feel alive. We had our producer Alex Coco DJing, blasting music. That's usually a no-no. I'm sure there's a lot of people in the industry here, and as you know, you're not supposed to be blasting music on set and marrying it with your location sound recording, but I really wanted to, to really feel the energy of the club and see people bouncing to on the same tempo and all. And so, and then I had Mikey had a wireless mic and we had an earpiece, and I would just say, okay, go over to that guy on the right. And Mikey would be approaching a total stranger and allowing that interaction to play out. When I felt I had enough, I would say, okay, leave him and go across the room to that guy. And Mikey had done so much preparation, as she said, spending time in that club, shadowing dancers and everything, that she understood what these transactions and interactions would be. But also she was looking out for me as an editor, because she would make each interaction a little bit different, giving me variety. And which was just an absolute gift.
So, was that actually at the headquarters?
Oh yeah.
So the men who are there, those are actors?
Those are background actors.
But are the other dancers, are those dancers from headquarters?
Some were from headquarters, yes, and then some were from other clubs in New York.
Because I'm so interested in terms of your background actors. Did you say, okay, Mikey's gonna come around and she may come to you, she may not, you're just gonna have to be here, and like the improvisational sort of thing of all those guys just had to be sort of open
My
to.
wonderful ADs, my first AD being Lisa Mann, obviously had to control all of this and inform these background actors what they were expecting, what to expect, and it was got a lot of gold from that.
Drew, because it's not just a very kind of tonally diverse sort of film. There's obviously also a lot of different locations, and there's also like different things that are happening. And I'm curious, as an outsider, I would think, oh, shooting in the club, the way that we're describing right now, that would be really difficult. But I'm curious in terms of whether it's being in Vegas or going around Coney Island and getting that stuff. Is there something that when you are preparing that this is actually the toughest stuff in terms of what I need to do, what it's going to require of me? Obviously, you've been doing this for quite some time, but as you're sort of mapping out production, what are you looking at in terms of these are going to be the real challenges in terms of getting what we need to get?
Well, I thought there were going to be certain challenges, but everything was very challenging on this film. It's funny, people ask me a similar question. I'm like, oh, that was a really hard film. That was the hardest one. And then I'm like, no, that was the hardest film. I'm like, oh, no, the ending was the hardest scene. I'm sorry, scene. The home invasion was the hardest scene. I mean, they're all hard. And this movie, it's a small movie, and it felt like a short schedule for the ambition that we had. But honestly, some of the things that I'm the most proud of is the tonal shifts, the way it looks different as the film progresses, and doesn't feel like, it's one film, but it feels like it evolves and changes, and those are the kind of films that I like to watch, and to actually get a script where you can do that, and you're so in sync with the director, and you're protecting the film, you're protecting the vision of the film all along the way. I feel like we all are, we all loved this film so much that was like our main goal. And also I'm really proud of the fact, like what you're saying with the location, the club and whatnot, is like, I feel like with all of Sean's films, we try to capture the location and the sense of place. And it's very, very important to us, and I just feel like we did a good job of that, I feel like Red Rocket, we did that, this film we did that, and I feel like I like to watch films and go to the theater and get transported somewhere else, and I feel like the way we shoot films, it's a really, I think we do a good job of that. You know, it's a really cool experience to go on that journey with Sean.
And Drew is an incredible craftsman, an incredible artist. We're on the same page all the time. You know, we know our films are contemporary stories, but we always want them to seem like they were shot in 1974. Have that nice vintage feel, that classic cinema look. And I can always, you know, trust in Drew to deliver that.
I wanted to ask Mikey about the home invasion, essentially. How many days was that shot? How long did that?
We scheduled for 6, but it took 8. We realized after the second day it was going to take a little longer. There's a lot of moving parts.
So, because you're the centerpiece of it, Mikey, I'd love to hear about, you want to talk about physical. Like, that is incredibly physical. How much of it is choreography, and how much of it is sort of a rough idea, and we'll see how things play out? I'm imagining it's a mixture of the two, but I'm curious how it actually works in reality.
Well, for the home invasion sequence, very choreographed. I think that was it was so necessary because I wanted to do all my own stunts, and Yura did too, and we're really like getting quite scrappy with each other, and so we needed to know where we would be at each moment. That was very important. Also, to just continue the progression of all the scenes to make that sequence, we needed to map it out. And so I think we did a lot of rehearsal. We just walked into this space one night and just tried to talk through how we would get from A to B. And it was really helpful because then you get on set, and even though we had done it at like half speed essentially, I know what's going to happen. But you know, nothing really can prepare you for actually jumping in and filming it. And pretty intense scenes to do, very physically and emotionally exhausting. But what I will say, the scene where Annie fights Diamond at the club, which it's sort of darkly lit, that was, I would say, much less choreography, more of like, okay, we have this amount of time to do it. So, you know, you guys can just like, you'll like do the punch, and then she'll grab you, and then, you know, end up here, and you can knock this table over and roll over this, and then this happens. And Lindsay and I looked at each other, Lindsay Normington, who plays Diamond, and we were like, okay, I guess we'll just go for it. That was the most insane thing I've ever done, because we were, I've never fought a woman before, and we were just fighting each other like that. It was so intense. Like, Yura Borisov, who plays Igor, was literally dragging my like limp, lifeless body away at the end of each scene because it was so exhausting to film that. So that one was much less choreographed, but the home invasion was very planned out.
At the beginning of this conversation, Mikey, you said that Annie is very different than the person that you are. And I'm really curious about not just the research and learning how to do the moves, but just to understand the mindset. How long did that take in terms of understanding this is who she is? It's not like the audience knows a lot about her background, but I'm guessing you and Sean talked about that. I don't want you to reveal that, but I'm curious, like, was that part of it, sort of figuring out who she is? Like, where did she come from? Who is this person before that first scene?
Yeah, that was a huge part of it, because I recognized how foreign her life is to mine. I was like, okay, I need to just start small. And so Sean and I had talked a lot about her and our ideas, but I was like, I feel like it scared me. I was like, I feel like I don't know who she is, and I want her to be this fully formed, complicated, complex woman. And so I sat down on my computer and I was like, I'm just gonna ask myself questions about her. So I wrote out like, I don't know, 100 or so questions, and over time I would just fill them in. And I think by doing that, I was able to just put the pieces together about who she is, so that someone could ask me a question about her and I would always have an answer. because I knew her so well. And so I think doing all of that emotional work, all the psychological work of building a character and her backstory and who she is, what her morals are, like what cigarettes she smokes, all of those things, on top of the accent work, the research into sex work, the physical physicality that I built for her. One day, we were on set for the first time, and I was like, oh, I am this person. I know exactly who she is. There is no stone left unturned, and everything just came together in a specific way, but I never felt like I fully understood her until that first day on set, when I was in hair and makeup, and I have her nails on and her clothing, and everything just fell into place.
I'm so interested about these questions and you coming up with the answers. Were the answers also talking to the consultants and from the research, or how did you come to find the answers for yourself for all these questions that you came up with?
Well, so much about Annie as a person was informed by talking to these incredible consultants and reading memoirs. I would watch YouTube videos, like a night in the life as a dancer, those kinds of things, and just try to get as much information as possible. But a lot of it was just me trying to fill in the blanks for myself. I think that's just sort of someone's job as an actor, whatever their personal preparation or process might be, just to try to understand them. And for me, it's always been more intuitive. I think whatever I feel like I need to do for that specific character, I'll do and understand. But for her, I felt like I needed to go a little deeper.
Yeah, and there are also just the basics outside of sex work. The fact that she's first generation Russian American living in Brighton Beach. What does that mean? That probably means that her grandmother and her mother came over here after the fall of the Soviet Union around 1990. You know, we sort of figured, we did talk about those basic, the basic backstory stuff. We actually even wrote an epilogue, which I'll never reveal to you guys, but, and I thought that was kind of, I don't know if that, I think it, hey, like, if the movie's working, I guess it worked, I have no idea. I don't even know if I made a good movie until, I don't know, I won't know for 10 years whether this movie is good. Because I can't judge my own films, you know? It's like, so I don't even know if this was a good, doing that was good, but I wrote an epilogue that I gave to my actors. They know what happened. They know what happened after that day in the car, that moment in the car. But it's designed for you guys to have your own ending and write it yourself as well.
I understand that thing about when you're so close to your work, it's hard to. But I'm telling you, this movie is terrific.
Okay, cool.
I was going to ask everyone in the audience, these three fine folks actually need to dash right now, so if you don't mind staying in your seats, they actually need to run though. But congratulations, thank you so much for sharing your insights and for making it.